Hi, Jen. How you going?
Pretty good. How are you doing
I'm
today, Mike?
not too bad. I'm not too bad. Australia is heating up again. I'm not used to reInvent with it getting hot, but we had a couple of days back there where I actually could wear a hoodie from a previous year, and it kind of felt right. But now it's just got back to the way it normally is.
Well, it's nice and snowy here in Denver, so it feels like
Oh,
winter.
yeah. I wish. I wish. So I have this. So my reInvent. I have this vision of you, and you're doing the show floor and you're really getting into it, and you have the backpack on. It looks like it's full of swag. It might not be, but it looks like it is. And there's a deep composer just kind of like furtively kind of like out the back saying, look what I managed to get hold of. How has reInvent been for you this year?
It's definitely been different than last year. I have not been able to focus on reInvent nearly as much as I did last year, which is unfortunate, but I have managed to catch the sessions that I care about the most and squeeze them into my schedule one way or another.
For sure. So no time off work for reInvent. I mean, clearly, I I don't know what your house looks like, but you're not at home right now.
That is true. I am not. Yeah, I actually had set aside the week for reInvent and I was planning on taking it off. And then I ended up repurposing that week to do some other training. And since I took that week off for other training, I have to squeeze reInvent in the rest of my time
Sure.
as I can.
reInvent being 4 weeks this year as well doesn't help. I'm just going to take a
True, but I
month
kind of
off.
like that.
You do?
Yeah.
Okay, talk me
Well,
through that.
I appreciate the slightly slower feed of sessions that it makes available. And
Sure.
I definitely appreciate that all of the sessions are available after the fact because I actually binged on sessions last weekend and the weekend before. I
Yeah,
had more time available for it. So that was kind of nice.
the binge that usually happens sort of post reInvent on the YouTube kind of thing throughout the year, I guess. Yeah,
Exactly.
same for me as well. I've managed to catch a couple of sessions on those repeats. I've not actually managed to catch any session at the actual official allotted time that it's broadcast. Much to do with my time zone. Even though they've tried, don't have any time off from day-to-day activities, so don't get to watch them. Yeah. So
Yeah,
evenings is
that's
not a
fair.
good time for us. In terms of reInvent scheduling, our evenings seem to be pretty bare. So yeah, whatever. So what's been your takeaways from reInvent? Let's dig into announcements and things that have caught your eye.
Well, so a lot of the ones that have caught my eye are ones that your other guests in the hallways at reInvent have already covered. So I don't want to dwell on them too much, but things like the a lot of the ML improvements that they've released in the new services, and I'm not even going to try to say their names because they're typical AWS names. But there's several of those that have caught my interest that I'm looking forward to diving into and getting to know a little better.
Yeah.
And the main one that actually really has me excited is one that they just mentioned in Vogel's keynote,
Yeah,
and
sure.
that's the AWS fault injection simulator.
Yes,
That one
okay.
I'm really excited about.
So this is chaos engineering as a service. So chaos,
Yes.
was that chaos engineering? Was that a term that Netflix themselves actually developed, or did they certainly jumped on top of it? They had the chaos monkey, an idea of a concept of services that you could spit up on your side of things that would randomly terminate things and just get in the way generally of your architecture. And if you can survive that, then you're worthy of being in production. That's basically chaos engineering in a nutshell, would you say?
Kind of. It's even a little more crazy than that though, because they actually run their chaos engineering experiments in production.
Right.
So they're running them on live systems that their customers are using while customers are using them, and they run them during prime business hours. So they actually pick times when it's kind of peak usage to run their chaos experiments because that way they can verify that their system can really survive it. And at my company, we've actually been doing chaos engineering for, oh goodness, 3 or 4 years now. So we've been kind of on the early edge of it as well.
Nice.
And seeing Amazon finally offering it or AWS finally offering it as a service is huge. That's really exciting.
So you're not doing it in production though, I'm guessing, by the way that you're saying, or are you?
Yeah, we are with a few of our systems. Most of
Nice.
our systems, we do it as part of our integrated pipelines. So we run chaos experiments as part of our automation.
Nice.
system, which, that's great. And that eases our customers' minds too, because a lot of them don't understand the idea of breaking things in production
Yeah, for
on
sure.
purpose.
All right.
That scares people.
I want you to tell me a bit more about the service as you know it, because obviously it's a very new thing soon. But just before we get to there, just generally then, using that chaos engineering methodology internally in the organization, um, was there much of a was it a hard sell, I suppose, to start with, and give us a little bit of a description about the journey that was.
Sure. So we actually started running chaos on a small system that we were creating for a customer, and we didn't tell them we were running it until we actually had verified that it was working and that the experiments were successful. And that one we were not running in production. We were running that as part of our testing and integration process. And then we demoed it to them after the fact, kind of saying, oh yeah, and by the way, here's how we know that our system is fault tolerant, and here's how we know that it will survive these adverse impacts and that it'll roll through it and be fine with zero downtime, because we've been doing these experiments. Let's run one right here, right now for you to watch live. And we had our whole development team in the room with the customer so that they could see that nobody was frantically working away and fixing things in the background. We literally all sat there with our hands above the table watching as everything unfolded, and it blew the customer's mind. And after we did that, they were thrilled with it, and they looked for us to continue doing that as we continue our support for them. And then internally we used that and that success with that customer as a lever, essentially, to convince our company that it was a good idea to do some chaos experiments in our other systems. And we've slowly been managing to push it out to more and more of the systems that we operate.
Nice. So from go ahead.
I was just going to say, as far as the selling factor of it, we were sneaky.
Yeah.
We sold it essentially under the covers initially, and then after we convinced one customer, we've been using that to more organically spread it throughout the organization.
And so then presumably now that customer and maybe other customers are actually asking for it as part of the delivery.
Yeah, they are. They're starting to pay attention to the fact that we're successful at doing that.
Yeah, that's nice.
And they're seeing the downtime and how low it is on our systems and realizing it's effective.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so obviously, so you have a wealth of experience in doing this from a sort of service point of view yourself. Now we have this as a managed service from AWS. I've not looked into this in a great amount of detail. I don't know how much chance you've had to look at it. It seems like it's a first step. Can you tell us a bit more about what does it do? What does it touch?
So it looks like, and I didn't actually catch the sessions where they were talking about it, so I've been looking at the documentation to try and suss out exactly what they're offering. It looks like they've got the basics covered that they need to have covered. They've got RDS, they've got EC2, they've got ECS and EKS all covered in their initial offering that's going to be available. So, those are all kind of the services that we really care about having single points of failure. So that makes sense that those would be the initial things. One of the things that I think is really cool about what they're offering is that they're actually giving you the guardrails and allowing you to configure your triggers that will cause the system to stop the chaos testing and roll everything back. And that's, from my experience, that's something that companies really often get very, very wrong in their chaos experiments, is they don't include those guardrails. So AWS offering those as part of their managed service is important.
Yeah, okay, so this is things like a CloudWatch metrics that you can keep an eye on, and if something's going wrong, then you can stop.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, the point of chaos experiments, right, is to directly inject failure into your system deliberately so that you can then observe your system and see how it responds. And theoretically, you've architected your system effectively so that it sails through the failure. But there can be cascading failures that happen sometimes, especially if it's the first time you've run an experiment on your system. And those cascading failures can turn into really, really big problems, right? So the guardrails and those alerts and alarms you can set up that stop the experiment and roll things back to what they were beforehand helps control that blast radius from your experiments.
Yeah, sure. You're still at some meta level. You're still supposed to be in control of this, right?
Absolutely.
Going completely rogue. I must admit, when I the very brief reading I did do of it, I missed ECS and EKS, and I had that in my mind. It's like that. Surely that's you want to be random pods to be terminated and things. That's something you want. Just EC2 and RDS on its own wasn't enough. So I'm really glad you've said that, because that sounds far more complete. What in terms of stuff that you've been doing, then does this, are there still things that, oh, clearly there are more things that could get added to this, but what would be next next cab off the rank in terms of adding some functionality into this or service coverage?
So one of the things that I would love to see AWS branching out into with the covering or with the offering of this is serverless architectures, things like the Lambda functions and the Dynamo DBs and the Aurora DBs and the various other things like that that don't necessarily have the server behind them, but are still vulnerable to some of those failures in your system. And if you don't architect your system right, there's still going to be problems. I would love to see them expand the chaos testing that they offer to encompass those services as well.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was just recently in a chat with Ben Kehoe. Ben did like an office hours session with a few of us, and this did come up, was the notion that serverless architectures, you can put code, you can inject something into your code to artificially make your Lambda function, say for example, be non-performant and to have a timeout or something. But then you've got things like your interaction between your API gateway and DynamoDB. If it's going directly, there's nothing you can do. Somebody in that discussion raised the idea of having actually a sort of a chaotic region. So like a region where you could like deploy stuff, which would just sort of like be randomly bad. I can't actually see AWS going along with that, but thought it was an interesting concept.
That would be a really interesting concept. I could see them running with that and making it available as a service, right? Chaotic region as a service or something like that, that you'd have to sign into and deliberately deploy to. And I don't know, maybe they set it up so that you can't, use Route 53 to route anything to it.
Yeah,
or something like that, so that you can test your systems and see how they respond in essentially a global sandbox or a regional sandbox.
Yes.
I don't know. That's kind of a cool idea. That would be pretty slick.
I just imagine the support issues that come out of this. It's like, which region are you running in? Oh, okay. Now you realize that region is not actually intended for production workloads. But even then, like, how does AWS level support managed chaos engine? What's it actually called? I forget the name of this service that's just come out.
Fault injection simulator.
Fault injection simulator.
Yeah.
It's a bit of, yeah. I've heard better names, but okay. So yeah, how do you manage this? It's going to be interesting because you're actually trying to get like this fault situation. When you're actually trying to support this, what's actually at fault? Is it the way that you recover from the fault? Is it the fact that the fault didn't actually impact you because somehow you have a better system than that? Yeah, I don't envy them trying to look into this. Is that something? I'm assuming that's not something that's so much of a problem for you because it's part of the pipeline, the deployment pipeline. So I'm assuming that means you're deploying into a staging environment which is specifically set up for this testing.
That's correct. Yeah, we spin up a stack using all of the same templates that we use for our production systems, and we deploy our software into that stack, and then we deliberately inject failure into it. And we have several different failure modes that we'll inject. Things like Chaos Monkey that goes and randomly terminates an instance or a pod in our Kubernetes clusters, or things like that. All the way up to, we do have an in-house implementation of Chaos Gorilla that goes and mimics the complete destruction of an availability zone.
Sure.
Right. So it kills all of the instances that we have in that availability zone and makes sure that our system can still sell through it. And we have, all the CloudWatch logs and alerts set up to alert like crazy. And we expect to see those alerts come through. And part of the testing validation that we do is making sure that we got the logs we expected to see, and that then our performance was where it needed to be, and we still meet our requirements for throughput and latency and all that. So it's pretty, on some of our systems, it's pretty thorough. On some of our systems, it's a lot less mature, but we do, go through and continually revise and adapt and extend the experiments that we're executing as part of that pipeline.
That's brilliant. I mean, it sounds far more ahead of the curve than lots of, or maybe anybody else I've spoken to in this space. So yeah, can you simulate the outage of Kinesis in an entire region? I'm just asking off the top of my head. Just
we haven't had to do that yet. We typically deploy onto instances, and so we'll simulate the destruction of all the instances in a region, or we'll have a Kafka message bus that's distributed across multiple availability zones in a region, and we'll verify that it still behaves itself and recovers when
Yes.
an availability zone is gone. And we've even gotten really crazy a few times in live demos and had a system that we deployed across 3 or 4 availability zones in a region and terminated a couple of those availability zones and showed that even losing multiple availability zones, we can still recover and continue processing.
That's awesome.
So it really depends on the system. It's fun. It's fun
Yeah.
work.
So what I don't want to get into a mud throwing session about Kinesis and obviously that outage. I thought some of the thing that was interesting for me was sort of this, all of a sudden you kind of get to see under the hood about sort of the way some of these services work behind the scenes, and actually Kinesis is actually quite involved in quite a bunch of things that maybe I'd never really thought of before. What was that day like for you? What day of the week was it? It was Friday for us. Was it like middle of the night for you?
Yeah, it probably would have been middle of the night. And I've got to be honest, we're not using Kinesis in any of our production systems.
Sure.
So we weren't really directly impacted by the outage.
That's interesting. Well, I mean, so yes, and that's obviously you're stating a fact. What was interesting for me was the fact that the Kinesis was, as I understand it, it was like involved with some auto scaling, for example. So some things weren't auto scaling appropriately, or were just going off the rails there. There were other things to do with the metrics that were getting missed and stuff as well. So it's the ramifications and the knock-on effect from the fact that Kinesis has sort of got its tendrils in all of these things under the hood. I mean,
fair.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the timing of it, helped us out, right? In your area, it was a daytime failure. In our area, it was more a middle of the night failure. So our systems weren't scaling actively at that time because they just weren't in heavy usage.
Yeah.
So
sure.
We probably would have noticed a lot more problems had we been in a more active usage time period.
Yeah, sure. No, that's cool. That's cool. Okay. So reInvent, 4 weeks long. You've said that obviously you're kind of like the fact that things are spread out a bit. I didn't have the same sense when it all first started, because all of a sudden I was at every location at reInvent all at the same time on day one, and it felt very much like I was. I like the fact that when I was at reInvent, physically you have this sort of this natural locational geospatial filter that you can apply around it. If it's not happening here, I don't know about it. Go back to my hotel room later and scroll through some feeds and stuff. But anyway, it has calmed down. You're absolutely right. What's your thoughts to pushing through to January? I mean, did that make you go, oh yes, or did it make you go, really? Because that's what it made me do.
Honestly, it was more of the latter. Part of it was a little bit of irritation because I have a feeling they're probably holding back some pretty cool service announcements until that January week, and I'd really rather they get them all out now so that we can start looking at them and playing with them over the holidays.
Right.
So if they do announce some cool new services in January, we're going to be hot and heavy and busy running, doing our job, so we're not going to have as much time to play with it. And that was always one of the advantages of the early December reInvent schedule, was that you'd learn about all these cool new services. You had a couple weeks to think about them and decide which ones you wanted to do anything with, and then the couple weeks between Christmas and New Year's was always kind of a slow time at work, and so we could go in and play and experiment a little bit and test out some of those services. So I'm a little concerned that we're going to miss out on that opportunity with things that they release in the January, or that they announce in the January week. That said, there's always so much information, and like you said, you kind of miss out on a lot of it when it's all right there going on at the same time. So I kind of look forward to the idea of being able to, go back over the next several weeks and explore some of the sessions that are out there that I didn't have time to watch right now while they were happening. There's pluses and minuses to it. I definitely miss all the human interaction. I really miss being able to see all my friends from around the world. That's been a challenge because I look forward to seeing everybody.
Yeah,
and that's not really happening.
That's right, and fingers crossed that's something that AWS takes on board. I think that the interactions in the sessions, and we've talked about this on other videos, but the interactions in the sessions and interactions between people, I think could be fostered more. I think I said before, I think the reInvent this year has happened inside of Slack channels across the world. And yes, some kind of capability to be able to sort of join together those conversations would be welcome, I think. But
It really would be.
it's I'm no doubt a massive scale challenge. I think that even though we can all sort of see that reInvent wasn't going to happen in a physical space, we probably saw that probably March, we could sort of kind of think this isn't going to happen. That's not a lot of time to change something of this magnitude. And yeah, I'm glad that I didn't have to be working that space. But they sent out all these camera kits and all these lighting kits and taking in all of these presentations, recorded all these things, putting together the platforms to be able to stream everything out. Yeah, I think that maybe doing a sort of minimum viable product and getting it right was probably better than trying to do everything and it falling in a horrible heap. So session catalog aside, that needs to be fixed. AWS, that needs to be fixed. Everybody knows that needs to be fixed. But apart from that, yeah, I think it hasn't been too bad. I do wonder whether there's going to be much in the way of big announcements or really any announcements next year in the January session. I was a little surprised, I suppose, to see that even a couple of things coming out over the last couple of days. Cloud, what's it? Cloud Console, is that what it's called? No, Cloud Shell. Cloud Shell was sort of sends its little ripples around the world. But I've got a feeling that maybe we're not going to see much more now, and it's more about content and community content as well in January. So we should. I know a couple of people whose sessions haven't been shown yet, and they're like, I've been put into the special bucket in January. So
how do they feel about that?
I'm yet to speak to them directly about this issue, but maybe if I present it to them as they're in the special bucket, not in the so they've been elevated to this special platform. I don't
know. they're in the bonus session.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the one more thing section. There's something exciting. So no toy this year. No toy not really anyway. There's been a couple of things, but nothing in the same level of deep something.
Yeah, there's nothing that really would have made me completely rearrange a schedule so I could go and try to make it into a session to get the toy, like I did with Deep Composer last year.
For example, yes. So there is a story behind this, that I was desperately trying to get my hands on one. And so this is why I have this vision of you just walking past me on the booth. You're just walking past me with, oh, it's still in my backpack. But yes.
I tried to be really nice to you last year when I realized how jealous you were that I got one. I tried to not rub it in too much.
Jealous probably is the right word, but it's not a word that I would prefer. But yeah, obviously I managed to get hold of the unbranded keyboard, and you helped me out with access into the workshop stuff. So I was very grateful for that. And yeah, pretty much left it there. I don't know that Deep Composer really took the world by storm. Everybody's still talking Deep Racer, right? That's the mind share is still there.
It is. Well, and it doesn't help Deep Composer's case that Deep Racer keeps getting upgraded as well. I mean, a lot of the recent updates they've made to it have made it more powerful and more fun to play with. So
yes, yeah. And it is a toy, but you're right, and it captures everybody's imagination. And they put this whole channel around it with people getting super excited and waving flags and giving trophies away. So yeah.
And in a lot of ways, it's more accessible than Deep Composer, because Deep Composer, unless you want to just use the basic tracks that they make available that are frankly kind of boring, you have to have some pretty decent musical knowledge, or else you're not going to be able to make anything that's fun to listen to, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a limited area. It's that intersection of people who are into music, know enough about music to be able to craft an interesting melody to build off of, and are into machine learning and artificial intelligence and want to play with that. So that's a fairly small group of people around the world, I would think.
Yes. And I suppose really it was sort of intended to be this sort of poster child for generative adversarial networks. And I honestly think that Deep Racer hasn't really been the poster child for reinforcement learning. It's been a poster child for something fun and cool. And yeah, you get to know what reinforcement learning is, but good luck taking the stuff that you've learned from that and applying it to something else. So yeah, just about I mean, for my money, Deep Lens was probably the most practically useful one of all of them. And so maybe it was time to retire that line of things. And now we've sort of grown up. So we've got the Panorama and Monotron. They're not toys. They're not for us.
No,
I'll still
no,
want to
those
play with
are
them, but yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to get my hands on a whole network of monotrons and
absolutely.
really have some fun with that. But that's a bit cost prohibitive. So
Yes, I think so. Yes, it's
probably
not
not
it's
going to
not an
happen.
IoT project which is going to see a lot of adoption in my house. But yeah. All right. Well, anything that you are anything that you're looking forward to, or anything that you kind of missed from reInvent that you'd like to have seen there that wasn't there? That's a rather unfair question because that's just thrown at you.
So again, the social side of things is the piece that I miss,
Yeah, yeah,
and
sure.
having the social opportunities, like the insanely huge breakfast hall that you can just randomly meet people at. I made some new friends there that I still talk to, last year at reInvent, just because we happen to share a table. So those chance interactions that I really miss, and that is really, really difficult to replicate in an online virtual conference. I'm not sure how you would do that.
No.
And then of course, you can't top the drone show at Replay last year. That was pretty awesome. So, that type of wow
Yeah,
factor you just don't really get in this type of a setting.
making me a bit emotional now. Yes, that was pretty epic. I watched that video back from time to time. Maybe I'll have to do that again.
That was
Well,
pretty
all right.
amazing.
So when I've been having these conversations with people, you may have seen, I like to try. We are not. You and I right now are in a virtual space somewhere, so we get to decide. We could be anywhere, um, anywhere real or fiction. Where shall we say that this conversation took place?
Well, given that I know that you're enjoying a heat wave where you are right now and that you'd love to see some snow, I
Yes.
personally nominate somewhere in the Rocky Mountains.
Awesome. That sounds brilliant. Name me a place in the Rocky Mountains. I'm not. I know where. I know the Rocky Mountains, but
Yeah, let's go with I'm trying to think of one that's not too tourist trappy, but is
yeah.
still really, really cool. How about Breckenridge? Let's assume we're in Breckenridge,
Wow.
enjoying
There is.
enjoying a cup of tea, sitting next to one of the outside fireplaces with snow all around, and
That sounds brilliant.
snow-covered pine trees.
There is actually a
That's
Brackenridge just down the road from me, so I could go down. It's not. It's not. It doesn't sound the same. Not at all sound the same. But that sounds brilliant. Let's go there. That'll be nice and cool. The tea would warm us, and we can hopefully, as long as it's good Wi-Fi, then I'm happy to join you there. Maybe next year we'll figure out a way to do this. So
yeah, there you go.
yeah. Jen, thanks so much for making time to have a chat with me. Really appreciate it. It's been great to catch up, and yeah, look forward to talking to you again really soon.
Thanks, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Thank you.
Today.